Okay, it's time for Jerry and the Goddesses, part 25. Here we go. Our local contact turned out to be a middle aged Australian man with a large beer gut, khaki shorts, and a Hawaiian t shirt. We met him at the local bar, which turned out to be a home whose owner had cut a hole in one wall and put up a couple of wooden planks to make a place to serve moderately cool beers from. He wasn't a normal contact like we do in the company, however. In fact, he had no clue we were coming, and he wasn't a local or even in tight with the locals. Nor was he an academic of any real sort. Instead, he was a conspiracy theorist who'd been blogging about his ancient aliens theory for several years now. After discussing how best to approach him, we decided to send Sarissa and Gary. Sarissa would lead the way as she was our resident expert on everything, which actually smarts a little, seeing as how I have a PhD in history and I speak 18 languages. But I can't really compete with a goddess, so Gary would remain a step behind, keeping his mouth mostly shut. He was supposed to just keep it shut, but I mean, come on, this is Gary we were talking about, and looking intimidating. He had certainly mastered the latter art. We didn't have any visible weapons, of course, and also, of course, us humans had handguns tucked away in concealable holsters. His was a big 45 since he had a lot of muscle to hide it. Mine was a little 9mm, and Anna had materialized them after we landed. Even Kathy had one, per Gary's insistence. International travel could be difficult when you're armed, and Sarissa and Inanna's ability to teleport was out of the window. Doing so would break some sort of cosmic magical string that would reset our progress towards summoning Fulla. Inanna had talked about materializing a military helicopter, but while she could somewhat easily materialize one with a full load of weapons and fuel, materializing more fuel, because we would need to refuel mid-flight several times, was, in her words, tricky and not something we should rely on. I didn't really understand the particulars myself, but I'd long since learned to take their word for it. With things directly related to their domains, both goddesses were effectively omnipotent. Maybe not literally omnipotent, but close enough. But for things which were even slightly tangential, like Inanna refueling a military vehicle, they quickly dropped down to a level that was merely awe-inspiringly powerful. This was why we needed a contact in the first place. This fellow, one Jeffrey Tatum, had been blogging about his theory that an ancient Norse artifact was hidden somewhere nearby, and had recently finished a GoFundMe that produced enough money for him to travel here to check his theory. He had been keeping the exact location where he speculated the artifact to be a secret, which normally wasn't an issue for Sarissa. Basically, if any human being knew something, she did too. And that included knowledge from the past and even the future, though she always noted that future knowledge could be, quote, problematic and imprecise. But for some reason, she didn't know. She also didn't know that this fellow was merely pretending, which meant odds were that this guy knew something, and that said something wasn't just a secret, but a capital S secret. Hidden knowledge, protected by Fulla, goddess of secrets, which meant we were on the right track, even if this guy wouldn't or couldn't lead us to it. We had a backup plan in case he didn't cooperate, too. This was Inanna and my deal, and I was inordinately proud of the fact that I'd both thought it up and would play a pivotal role in it, should we use it. We'd find out if we would soon enough. Ixtlub may not be as intelligent as the goddesses, but he was still a fully formed god in his own rights. Once I managed to get him to understand me, he'd extended his veil of shadows over the whole Range Rover in which Kathy, Inanna, Ixie, and I sat. Being nighttime, that effectively made us invisible. We watched Sarissa and Gary approach the man from our vehicle. Sarissa was dressed in a nominally typical outfit for a white woman on vacation in Ethiopia, but which had been modified by Inanna. Her blue shirt was unbuttoned halfway to the waist, exposing smooth curves of flesh which were currently much paler than her usual sandy skin color. Her lips were coated in glossy red lipstick, and she wore a pair of small, square-framed spectacles. Both shirt and pants were tight enough that she'd actually had to, with much sighing and reluctance, make herself anatomically accurate in order to sell it. She looked really good, honestly. And Anna usually went for a shameless slut kind of look, but as applied to and by Sarissa, It had a degree of class that was quite appealing. I decided to try and convince Inanna to be just a touch more modest. I doubted I'd succeed, but I would kill to see her dressed up all classy. Well, classy-ish. Sarissa spoke to the man, who turned and favored her with a lascivious smile. After a brief exchange, he shot Gary a wary look, then reluctantly reached out to shake his hand. The conversation continued. "Want to know what they're saying?" Inanna asked, pushing her hand down my pants for the 5th time since we stopped. I shifted my hips forward a bit to help her. It was easier to just let her do her thing than to resist it. Besides, I think I was getting used to it after a couple of years. Her very touch could send a wave of pleasure through me, and though that was still true, it was a very familiar and comfortable pleasure. "No, I don't think we need to. If we have to fall back on Plan B, we'll know." Kathy looked back from her seat in the front, a cat's-eye Ixie on her lap. Without the veil of shadow surrounding him, or rather with all of us firmly inside of it and thus immune to its effects, he looked weird. He was all limbs and probosces, with jaws and fangs scattered around. He grew new limbs as older ones flowed back into the middle. I say the middle because he didn't really have much in the way of a body, more just a thicker area where all the limbs met. Inanna's hand vanished in an instant, reappearing on her lap by the time Kathy's eyes fell on us. I still felt her playing with me, though, so that was just an illusion. "Are we sure this guy can help? I mean, he sounds like a lunatic." I let Inanna answer. She was getting a little vigorous in her fondling, and I didn't trust my voice not to crack. "If Sarissa doesn't know what this guy knows about where to go, that means that either Astram's involved and has extended his veil of ignorance over it, or Fulla's involved and has domain over the knowledge as a secret. So either way, he's a solid lead, even if he is a lunatic." Kathy frowned at me. "Jerry, are you all right? You look a little stressed." "I'm fine," I gasped as Inanna gave me a squeeze that almost made me mess my pants. I turned and gave her my best impression of a hard look. It probably came across as whiny, though. I'm not a very intimidating guy. Inanna smiled sweetly right back and said to Kathy, "He's just smitten by my beauty again. It's perfectly normal." Kathy looked skeptical. "You look like you're holding in a fart, honestly," she said, then turned back around to watch the events playing out across the street. I relaxed a little when she turned away and grabbed Inanna's arm. We really needed to focus. I tried to pull it out, but I wasn't anywhere near strong enough to budge her. She grinned at me for a moment, then let go on her own. I relaxed even more, though now my pants were a lot tighter, so I'd really just replace one kind of discomfort with another. I leaned over and whispered in her ear as quietly as possible, "I don't want Kathy to see anything like that. It's rude and probably not helpful after what she's been through." Inanna whispered back, "Just relax, lover. No matter what we do, she won't notice. I promise." I sighed, knowing she meant it, and put my arm around her. She unbuttoned my pants and lowered her head to my lap, so I just focused on being as quiet as I could and enjoying the moment. It didn't take long. It never really did. By the time Inanna finished, the trio across the street were still talking. They seemed more animated now, with Jeffrey making shoe gestures at them. Gary stepped forward, and Jeffrey cringed down in his chair, but he didn't relent. Sarissa kept speaking in what were undoubtedly fully rational tones, but the guy wasn't having any of it. After another minute or two, she shrugged and turned to walk back, Gary on her heels. "I think it's time for Plan B, then," Kathy said, watching them approach. I dug into my pocket for my phone to make the call that would set it off.